What's up guys, V here, and in today's video I want to show you how you can swap your motherboard for a new one. So if you find yourself needing to swap your motherboard, this video should guide you through step by step. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, first thing I like to do is grab your phone and take several close-up pictures, as close as you can get with good lighting, on all the connectors. So just take pictures of every single corner, have as much information as you can possibly get, because when it comes time to put the new one back together and in here, you don't want to miss anything and you want to have some sort of reference to look at just in case. Now that's my first tip. So second thing we gotta do is take this GPU out. If you don't have a GPU, feel free to skip this, but yeah, let's go ahead and remove this. First things first, go ahead and remove the power connectors right here. Take your Phillips head screwdriver and either inside of the case or outside of the case, there should be some screws right here holding it in. This one, I need to take out this screw right here first, and then this cover comes off and then exposes the two screws I need to remove. Now that we got that removed, you can see the two screws I was talking about right here. So go ahead and remove these. Now for my system, I have this cooler with these pipes. I'm gonna move these a little bit out of the way because there is a little lever I need to push down here. Here is that lever that I was talking about, and I'm gonna use the screwdriver to push it in just like that. Hopefully you were able to see that, but now that we got that pushed in fully, this should be able to just slide right out. So give it a little bit of a wiggle and it should come out. Put this to the side somewhere safe. Now that you have more space here, you can definitely take some more pictures of the motherboard if you'd like. Every step of the way, feel free to stop, take some pictures so you know where everything goes back. Now we can start removing all the connections on the motherboard. So go ahead and start in one corner and go around and make sure you unplug everything. So I'll start down here. This big 24 pin, there is a little lever on the side. I'll try to show you. So here's that little lever. You gotta push it down on the edge here and then start going up and down, and it will come out. So just like that, and then continue removing all the other connectors. In my case, I have this all-in-one liquid cooler for my CPU, and the radiator sits right up here, which is in the way of me removing my CPU cables, which are right up here. So for me personally, I'm gonna have to either remove the radiator or I can just remove the fans. If you have a fan here instead of an all-in-one cooler, then you can leave it attached and then just transfer all of that stuff over to your new motherboard. First things first, I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these 4 screws. And once you remove all the screws, if there's nothing else holding it in place, it should come off fairly easy, but sometimes it will be stuck to your CPU because of the thermal paste. So what you're gonna need to do is sort of wiggle it around and sort of do a motion like this until you can get one corner off like this, and then you should be able to pull it away just like that. Now get your paper towel, fold it up. You can do a dry wipe first, just like that. And then do the same for your CPU. Flip the paper towel, and now get some alcohol and wipe off any excess that might have gotten all over the place. And then flip it over and give it a quick dry wipe again. That should be good. So for me, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the whole entire radiator. Again, use your best judgment call how you wanna do this part if you need to do it. And there we go, that is out of the way. Now you can see the connectors I was talking about up here, the CPU cables that come from your power supply. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this completely, but again, use your best judgment call. If you don't have this up here and you don't have an issue removing those, you can skip these steps obviously. And now finally we can remove these CPU cables. Again, there's little levers on this one right here. So you gotta push them down kind of like we did on that 24 pin and pull them out just like that. And on this motherboard, there's 2. Many motherboards only have 1. And now they're fully pulled out. And now the motherboard is ready to be unscrewed and removed out of the case. So take your big screwdriver and find all the screws. They typically look like this, either silver or black, depending on your motherboard and case. There might be 9 screws, usually 3 along the bottom, 3 along the center, and then 3 along the top. But if you have a smaller motherboard, there might only be 6, there might be 4. Just really depends on many factors. There's the first screw that we got out. This screw I loosened up, but it came off completely with the standoff screw, which is back here. Right back there, you see that whole standoff screw came off. And I'll show you how to remove that when we get this motherboard out. For now, just keep removing the screws. And now I'm on my last one. So I'm gonna try to like put my hand on something so it doesn't just completely flop out of there. And this motherboard isn't gonna really fall out, so that's good. But on some cases, it can just completely fall out, so be careful. So now go ahead and remove it. Make sure it's not caught on anything. And now that we got this out, we're gonna go ahead and put them side by side and start transferring everything over to the new motherboard. All right, so here's that standoff screw. So the way I'm gonna remove this is take my Phillips head screwdriver and a small pair of pliers, hold this in place, start turning it. Make sure you're going the right way. Don't accidentally tighten this. And there you go. Should come right off. And now we need to get that standoff screw right back in its place. This kit has a perfect tool for this. It's a little socket right here. This one is 5.0. I think that's 5mm. But as you can see, that fits perfectly in there. So take my screwdriver and just start screwing it in. And there we go. We got that right back in. So here they are side by side, and now we're gonna go ahead and start swapping everything from the old motherboard to the new one. So as you can see on this one, I have a contact frame, completely unnecessary, but I needed it for that build. So I'm gonna transfer all that over, which means I don't need this. But if you have an AM5 motherboard like me, using a Ryzen processor or even an Intel processor, this is really easy to do to remove the CPU from your old one. You just push down on this lever and then pull towards you or away from you, depending how you're looking at it, and then pull up, and then pull this up, and the CPU will come right out, and then you can transfer it over. Now on AM5 and on Intel motherboards, the pins are on the motherboard right here. So be very careful, don't bend any of those pins. Just be extremely careful. And then there's usually an arrow on your CPU if you forget the way that it's supposed to go in. And then if you have your stock plate installed, the arrow will be right here. But if you remove that, just put it back up here and verify where that arrow would be. And that way you can put this on the correct way. So just set it in there, you don't have to put any pressure. And then again, if you had this on there, you would have set it in here and then close this and then lock it in place just like that. For me, I have this contact frame, so I'm gonna set this carefully on top and then start screwing it in. Once you have that transferred over, I'm gonna need the small Phillips head bit, which is PH1 from this kit. And then we're gonna remove these 2 screws right here for my SSD. If you don't have an SSD, NVMe one specifically, then again, you can skip this step. Sometimes it's screwed in, sometimes it has these little levers that you just gotta rotate and this pops up, and then you slide it out. Do the same thing on this side, remove this. And then this one's missing that little lever, so I'm just gonna take it from this. Put your SSD in. And now I'm gonna put this lever like that, but if you need to screw yours in, just take the screw from there, the one you took off to remove this, and then put it here. Now we can put this right back on. Good. And just make sure not to over tighten anything. It just has to be snug, and that's pretty much it. Now for me, I'm gonna need to remove these brackets because I don't need them. So I'm gonna remove them and put them on this motherboard because this one's getting returned. And real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer this to this side here, just so we don't bend any pins. And now on my motherboard, the final thing I need to transfer is the RAM. So I'm gonna take these out, and on some motherboards, only the top or the bottom ones clip like this. So keep that in mind. There is quite a bit of pressure that you need to put for these to clip back in. And there you heard the clip. Sometimes it'll clip once, sometimes twice. So there you go. Just double check that they did seat properly. Everything is fine. And now this is ready to be transferred into the case. When you're doing this, make sure that none of these cables that you took out are gonna end up behind the motherboard. You don't want that. Now, if you're swapping from the same motherboard to the same motherboard, then you shouldn't have to worry about an I/O shield. It should still be in here or attached to your motherboard. But if you're switching to a new motherboard, then don't forget about your I/O shield, which should sit right in here. So if you had one on your old motherboard that sits in here, remove that and then put the new one in place of that and make sure it's in the correct orientation. So now we're 100% ready. So the way I'm gonna do this is make sure that these cables up here don't go behind the I/O shield. So I'll start a bit low. So there's a cable down here, as you can see, that is trying to go underneath. Don't let that happen. And now that's perfectly in place, ready for the screws. This could still fall out. This one's being held by the fan right here, but it could fall out, so be careful. But as you're holding this, check from the side view, make sure no cables are behind, because then you'd have to unscrew it again and remove those cables. So now get one screw ready, put it at the tip. It helps if you have a magnetic screwdriver, and with one hand hold this in place and start turning. And I wouldn't recommend tightening that first one all the way yet. You want there to be a little bit of wiggle room because sometimes not everything is aligned perfectly. So now take your other screw and make sure that the hole is aligned properly with the standoff screw. And now would be a good time, since you don't have to hold this, turn this around and double check everything. Make sure none of your cables are stuck behind or anything. And check your I/O shield, make sure it's aligned properly and everything looks good. So now everything looks good, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest of these screws in. Sometimes these screws will try to cross thread, meaning they'll go in like sort of slanted. You wanna make sure that they're going in perfectly straight and there's no resistance. You should be able to twist them like I am right here, with just like the tip of your fingers. If you feel too much resistance, back it off a few turns and either try a different screw or try that screw again. Just make sure that it's going in straight. And once you got all the screws in, go back around, make sure everything is just snugged up perfectly and you're good to go. All right, now we're ready to start plugging everything back in. And the first things we're gonna plug in are along the top here, because I wanna get this radiator back in place along with this water block. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and plug in these CPU cables. If you only have one 8-pin up here, you can do that. If you have two 8-pins, you can plug both of them in, or sometimes there's a 8-pin and a 4-pin, and these are meant to split apart like this. So just do that, and these connectors should go on fairly easy. So what I like to do once I get them in, I like to pull back and forth a little bit, make sure that they are fully seated and clipped in, and then just push the excess cable out of the case. Next up, we can plug in all of the other cables around the case. This is the HD audio. Connector should look like this. And that's what the header should look like there. There's one missing, as you can see, so it can't really be plugged in wrong. So if you feel some resistance, it might be going in the wrong way. So I like to wiggle it in place just like that, and that is good to go. Next on this case, we have one of these connectors. If you see a connector like this, this is called a USB connector or USB 2.0 connector. Sometimes there's a label, sometimes there's not, like this one. So those will plug into your headers that typically say USB just like that, or you could tell by the missing pin, and this one is missing a pin in the corner. So a little bit different than the HD audio. So line that up with the USB header on your motherboard and push that in, give it a little wiggle, you're good to go. Now these ones are the worst ones because there's so many. Some cases have all of these in one big connector. These ones are all separated, so I gotta do them individually. You can look up your motherboard manual to show you where your front panel connectors are. On this one, it's right over here. And if you look right here, they do give you some instruction as to how to plug these in with a plus and a minus. And sometimes your connectors will have a plus and a minus, sometimes they won't. But there's this little arrow that you can see right there that indicates the plus side. And then some of them, it'll show an actual plus. So bottom left is gonna get this HDD LED, and the plus is on the left side. And then reset switch, bottom right side, just like that. And then we need power LED plus on top all the way to the left, power LED minus right next to that, and then power switch is the final one, and that's gonna go with the little arrow on the left side, and just push those in, and that's how it should look in the end. I know those connectors down there are a bit of a pain. I do have a full tutorial that I will link in the description if you need more help with these front panel connectors. Next, I'm gonna continue plugging everything in. Next up, we're gonna do this 24 pin. And this just plugs in just like the way you took it out pretty much. And you do need to put some pressure, and it doesn't really have a super satisfying click or anything. So you can feel around, make sure that it is fully seated properly. Now for me, I'm gonna go ahead and put the radiator up first, and then we'll connect the water block here with some new thermal paste. You can skip this part if you need to and just install your either water block or whatever you had on your CPU prior to this. I guess I did forget to mention you will need some thermal paste. I'll have a link down in the description to this one, but you can use any thermal paste. All you're gonna need is about a pea-sized dot in the center of your CPU. I like to make a very thin X so that way it spreads a little better. So I know that looks like a lot, but it's actually really thin, and if you wanted to, you could definitely spread it around. I just let the pressure from the screws do its thing. So, and then we'll do a cross pattern, which means we'll start in this corner and we'll work our way down to this corner. That way we're getting even pressure top to bottom and side to side. If we did this one and this one, there would be more pressure on this side. Or if we did this one and this one, or even this one and this one, there would be more pressure on certain sides. So you want to go in a cross pattern to get it seated properly. So when people are talking about make sure your CPU cooler is seated properly, that's what they are talking about. Now this is a fan cable. They come in 4-pin and 3-pin. The main thing you want to worry about is this little rail right here that you see on top. This one specifically is for my cooler right here, the pump. So this motherboard has both a pump and a CPU, and right next to it, it has a system fan header. That's where we're going to plug in other fans. The CPU fan header will plug in our radiator fans, and then our pump fan header will have this pump cable that I'm holding. So the way you install these is that little rail I was talking about. You want to line up just like that and then push it in. And that's how it should look once it's installed. This goes for 4-pin and 3-pin. The 3-pin also has a rail, just follow that rail, and that's it. Now for my PC, I have these 3-pin RGB connectors, and those plug in right there. So you just line those up. There we go, that's plugged in. And then yours might have a 4-pin. This motherboard also has a 4-pin. That one, you would have to follow your connector where it says 12 volt, plug that in to where your header also says 12 volt. Like you see on this motherboard, the 12 volt is all the way on the left. But this video is more so about swapping out your motherboard, so I'm not gonna include way too much information about each connector and stuff. I just wanted to show you some of the basics, so keep that in mind. Your motherboard might be very different than mine. And of course, if you ever need help, you got those pictures that you took, so you can definitely take a look, make sure everything is plugged in the correct order, in the correct way, and you'll be good to go. Final thing we gotta do is plug in our GPU. So now to do this, flick that lever back down, the one that you flicked to remove the GPU, and line up this connector here with that one on the motherboard or wherever yours was, and just push down lightly. Sometimes you got to give it a little extra push and it should snap in just like that. Now we want to put the first screw in because you don't want this thing sagging or hanging. So I'm going to hold it up with one hand and screw in that first screw. Plug in your GPU connectors. And now finish putting on all of your accessories and everything else. And then that's pretty much it. Turn on your PC, make sure everything works, verify that your temps are good, and you're good to go. So that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully it was really helpful, and if it was, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.